Hello, history friends. Here we are finishing up our Period 7 PowerPoint. And although this will not end Period 7, as we still need to finish talking about World War I and World War II and the Depression and so on and so forth. But this is the little end of the little piece of progressivism that I just wanted to make sure that you had some knowledge of. So we're going to look today at the African Americans in the United States during the Progressive Era. African Americans were, for the most part, ignored by progressive presidents and governors. President Woodrow Wilson permitted, allowed, and was all for segregation of federal workers in buildings. So the federal government was segregated. So essentially, there were no African Americans allowed to have federal government jobs during the Progressive Era. Of course, Plessy versus Ferguson is passed during this time period, 1896. And Plessy versus Ferguson is a major Supreme Court case in which separate but equal is made legal. So, in other words, black and white kids can go to two separate schools legally under the Supreme Court ruling as long as the facilities were the same, which of course they never were. Plessy versus Ferguson is a landmark case, which is overturned years later by Brown versus the Board of Education, which we'll talk about. From the African American perspective, there are two approaches to help to alleviate poverty and discrimination. We talked a little bit in class today about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Let's start with Booker T. Booker T. Washington was the head of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, which is, of course, an institute that he founded. Essentially, what Booker T. Washington believed is that black folks needed education and economic progress were foremost important. However, they should concentrate on learning industrial skills and therefore they would earn better wages. They were essentially, Booker T. Washington essentially was looking to establish a secure economic base for black people in hopes to realize their goal of political and social equality later on. So he wanted black folks to kind of embrace the space in society that was meant for them or supposedly meant for them and do these menial, laborious jobs, be a mechanic, be a milkman, be a domestic servant, so on and so forth. But this is the space that they should maintain, and he was willing to give them the tools to do that with the Tuskegee Institute. W.E.B. Du Bois, however, did not believe this to be true in any way, shape, or form. He was a Northerner who became a distinguished scholar and writer. He was critical of Washington and demanded equal rights for African Americans immediately. He felt that African Americans, rightfully so, should strive to be doctors and lawyers, that they didn't have to be, maids and they didn't have to be milkmen, that they could have any job they wanted, essentially. We start in the Progressive Era with the Great Migration, which is when about 1 million black people traveled to the north between the years of 1910 and 1930. One reasons why they were leaving, or a couple of the reasons why they were leaving. One, deterioration of race relations in the South, severe segregation, lots of lynching happening at this time period, no equal white rights, opportunities, no jobs, etc., etc. Number two, the destruction of cotton crops by the boll weevil, which was a bug. And number three, job opportunities in northern factories that opened up when white workers were drafted into World War I. So this gives them a good opportunity. Of course, the onset of the Great Depression slows migration down. However, World War II will renew that migration because we're going to see more job opening up and opportunity. Between the years of 1940 and 1970, over 4 million African Americans head north or have moved to the north. Let's talk a little bit about civil rights organizations during the Progressive Era. We talked in class today about the Niagara Movement, which was headed by W.E.B. Du Bois, and essentially this discussed a program of protest and action aimed at securing equal rights for black folks. Then we see the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. Du Bois and Other Niagara Movement members and white progressives were involved in the NAACP, which still is in existence today, provides lots of help for African Americans, scholarships for kids, so on and so forth. During this time period, they strove to take legal action against segregation and lynchings and so on and so forth. The National Urban League was set up to help people migrating from the south to northern cities, give them an opportunity to find a place to live, clothes, jobs, so on and so forth. Moving out of the realm of speaking about African Americans and talking about another major movement at this time period, of course, was the quest for women's suffrage. Women's suffrage, essentially, the older generation of suffrage workers passed the torch to the younger, more motivated crew, and this is when we see the creation of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, or NAWSA, which was started by Carrie Chapman Catt. They argued for the vote as a broadening of democracy which would empower women. There were some militant suffragists who took, the call into their hands very vocally. They organized mass pickets, parades, and also hunger strikes. Eventually, Alice Paul would break away from NAWSA and form the National Women's Party. And essentially, because of a lot of things that she did, picketing the White House with other women, Woodrow Wilson was the president at the time, we'll see that the 19th Amendment is going to be passed in 1920, which guaranteed women's right to vote in all elections at the local, state, and national levels. So that's what I have for you right now to sum up our progressive movement. And come back, we'll start talking in class about World War I, the Great Depression, and onward to World War II. Have a great day, History Geeks!